so that we can't hear anything that's going on from anyone's house. Ooh. It has been a lovely day in Brighton. I seem to be getting some reverb for some reason. And I'm hearing somebody already. So let me just make sure everyone's muted. Right. Mute all. So we just let people join and we'll see where we go. How is everyone? Is everyone good? So people were saying hello, lovely day in Brighton. It was. I'm in Brighton too. Hello, Opal Fruit. It was lovely. It's so nice, isn't it? Hello, Krishna, you waved as well. Hello. It's been a lovely day here. So it makes such a difference to people, doesn't it? All that dust yesterday and all that. Okay, thanks. Nice nails. Orange, of course. A new color. Right. So Marina's saying, hello, everyone. So glad to be here. So glad to have you. LMB is saying, hi, everyone. So glad to be here after so long time unable to attend. I'm really glad you're back. And Master Jim says, happy St. Patrick's Day to everybody, because does everyone celebrate that? It's just an excuse to go out and drink, or what is it? Who knows? We've got, let me just go through a few. I'm just going to give a few people a few more minutes and see who's going to come in. Attendance varies, doesn't it, massively, from anywhere between 30 to 50 to like 100 something. So we'll just see who else is turning up. Hey Luke, nice to see you. Hi. Joey says, who needs an excuse to booze? Me. I'm not a big drinker, am I? Krishna says, hello, everyone, as well. Hello. So, as I said, if you've got anything to write, please write it down the side. Cosmic, hi, off out shortly. Oh, thanks. Just come in, use me, and leave. I don't mind. Stream has started, and I will check in later via the mobile. I'm sure a munch is much more important. Whore. Can I just say the people saying those things to Cosmic do know him? I think that's maybe a bit different. We're having a go. So, and again, always the consent. This is being recorded, so please remember that. Don't put your video on if you don't want to be seen. That's okay. It's mainly my face anyway. But if you don't want to be seen, don't have your video on. And that's why I say don't use your voices either. So please write down the side. And I try and keep up and read everything that everyone writes. I think I mainly manage that, but I don't always. So you might be here as a kinkster, you might be here as a therapist for CPD, you might be here for a lot of reasons. You might want to learn, you might just like the fact that it's quite cool to come along, you can have a nice time. It's up to you what you take from it. But it is being recorded and it goes up on London Alternative Markets. Oh, I can hear someone's mic again. Please mute. Mute all. Here we go again. Evening, missed several weeks but made it this week. I'm very glad. 1+6, thank you very much. Is that all 7 of you coming? So is all. Yeah, I know, really bad joke. It's like a bad dad joke, isn't it? Never mind. All right, so we're talking about really interesting topics today, so please write down the side. As I said, I want to learn about jealousy and ANR AVF relationships. Well, that's good because that's what we're talking about today. Plus we're talking about childhood fantasies. Andy says, hi everyone, glad to be back. Long time no see. Been really busy performing in kinky boots this last couple of weeks. It was a great time getting to legitimately wear 6-inch thigh-high boots. Good enough reason. It's a great show. It's one I really like. So nice. Morning Tempest and morning Mark. Hello from Time Change Canada. Yeah, I'm sorry. Our clocks change on the 27th. So next week we'll still be at this time, and the week after we lose an hour again. So we should be the same again as to what we were before. Apologies about that. I maybe should have said, but FetLife does change those things and keep them on. So let's just go through a few rules as the room's filling up. No personal comments to anybody, please. I mean, it's a little bit different if you really know someone, but if I don't know you know someone, I might pick you up on it. So just be aware. If you don't know someone, please don't turn around and say, oh, you look cool, I like your hair, or you're beautiful, or I love your lips, or gosh, look at your whatever. It's none of your fucking business. No one else is personal space. It's any of your business. So please respect everybody else's space. So no comments on anybody's looks, what they're doing, or anything else as well. And that includes me. Thank you very much. No nudity, no wanking. People say, have you ever had that? Yes, twice. So I've been doing these workshops. I think it's 2 years now. If we think it's March, it is about 2 years, isn't it? So we've been doing them every week for 2 years. That's mental. That's a lot of workshops. And we also have been doing them we did them every Sunday for the first year and a half as well. So that's a lot of workshops that we've done. And over that time, we have had 2 actual masturbators in the room. Please don't do it. We're not interested. I don't really understand what you're masturbating to. Get your rocks off somewhere else. That's not what this is about. Please don't try and grab a client if you're here as a therapist. That's not what this is for. This is for shared learning. So feel free to say something. Beth, that makes more sense. I thought I was going crazy. We think it was an hour later today. It's definitely not. It's just a time change. Sorry. And LMB, I've been interested and practiced A&R for some years now. I can't wait to hear what you have to share. And Isabella says, another A&R ABF fan here, got my popcorn at the ready. Yeah, it would be interesting to see, won't it? Dawning Times says, always baffles me why you want to wank whilst we're all just having an adult conversation. Lots of reasons. God, we could do a workshop on why people want to wank in public. That would be a whole workshop. It really would. Oh, dogs incoming. Yep, noise. You don't pay for this, so I let my dogs run around. Sorry, because you are getting something for free. So, and they bark sometimes. So those are the rules, basically. Please don't record it. It's on record anyway. You can watch it back under London Alternative Market's YouTube site. Master Jim, so big kiss to you. Ah, nice. We're getting lots of affection. Do you know that person? I hope you do, because we just said don't be personal. So it's nice to be affectionate, but I don't know. Darn internet. Sounds like your DJ doing scratching. Does it? Does everyone else get that? Yeah, it does mean you mean see doggos as well. I don't know what's going on there. I am hardwired in now, Ethernet. I think that's just you. Thanks, Isabella. So maybe log out and log back in again, Opal Fruit, see if that works if you want to. Okay, so what are we talking about today? We are talking about 3 different subjects. We are talking about A&R, ABF, another acronym to add to my kink vocab, says Grace. Safi said, fine, thank you. So we're talking about adult breastfeeding relationships, really, or adult nursing relationships. That's what they really mean. So we're talking about breastfeeding. So we're talking about that. We're talking about jealousy in all forms, whether that's in kink relationships, polyamorous, ethical non-monogamy, or whether it's also to do with friendships, you know, and just different relationships. People get jealous. It's quite a normal feeling. Love to the doggies. I'm sure they'll moan and they'll make sure that they're well known. They're saying that back for sure. And we're also going to talk about childhood fantasies, sexual fantasies, kink fantasies. Maybe you'll share some later on that you had as a child, how that impacted you, what you thought, you know, and what the difficulties around that were, and how much we should or shouldn't sexualize what children think about and the impact of that, because I'm seeing that more and more as well, especially as a therapist, and I'm sure other people are. Is there a place where you can find the topics of the workshops beforehand, says Red Nascal? Yep. So on FetLife, I put them up every time, and I've got the next 2 or 3 weeks topics as well already asked for. So yes, you can find it there. Or on the Pink Therapy group, it says what the topics are and what the topics are for the next few weeks as well. So yes, they're both in public places. And if you follow me on FetLife, there are an awful lot of, every day I put up a status saying this is what's coming, this is what's coming, this is what's coming. And then on the Pink Therapy group, I put it on there on the Thursday as well. Hi, Nancy from Portland, OR. Yes, we are friends. I'm glad. Okay, so I hope that answers your question, Red Nascal. Okay, so we were going to start, when I look at what I put it around the wrong way. So we're going to start with adult breastfeeding relationships. Then we're going to go on to jealousy. So because that's what I promised we would do. So there are a few fans here of adult breastfeeding relationships. There's a lot of, it's a very, how can I say this? It is not a well-known lust or desire or want or connection or intimacy. Some people really struggle with it. Puts titties in the air as a cheer for ABF. I'm glad. And Jacob says, I'm curious about it. When you look online, when you look at someone like FetLife, the maximum adult breastfeeding personals have 10,000 people as members. When you look at places like adult breastfeeding relationships.org, something like that, there are a few things about it out there. I think they're around 3,500 to 4,000 members as well. So this isn't a hugely spoken about thing. Many people who have a pregnant partner, regardless of their own gender, will want to try someone's milk. Milk can come in before a pregnancy, after a pregnancy, while someone's breastfeeding. It can come in years later. We're going to have a look at all of that as well, because potentially, you know, a cis-born man can lactate, but that's due to a lot of things. So we'll have a look at that as well. So the common assumption is that cis-born women who develop breast tissue will end up lactating at some point, but that's also a bit of a fallacy as well, because not all women do lactate, not all women can breastfeed, and there are many things that get in the way of breastfeeding for boob owners as well. It could be that they have, you know, inverted nipples so that, you know, it's inwards, or the ducts aren't right, or lots and lots of different things. Jacob, I remember that, but she didn't let me. Yeah, a lot of people don't want to breastfeed any adults. It's very private. It's definitely for the baby. People feel very strongly about that. Zoe, I tried my own breast milk when I had a child just so I knew what I was giving him. And it's very sweet, isn't it? It's quite a sweet liquid. And it's actually quite bland as well as it goes. It's not, don't know if any of you have tried it. I've definitely tried my own. And I have been in a nursing relationship in the past as well. So I've done a bit of both. I've been in an ANR, but I've done it from a kink perspective, again, slightly different. Grace, I saw it for the first time on series 2 of Netflix series The Alienist. Yeah, it's not, people are very ashamed or embarrassed about it. Isabella, yeah, someone who's a suckler rather than a feeder, finding a feeder is like winning the lottery, especially if you're a young WLW. Look, it's really hard to find people who are willing to do it. Some people sell breast milk, so you can buy it from them, and some people will let you suckle. But let's start from the very beginning. Let's talk about breast milk a little bit. So can you breastfeed? There are definitely systems in place that you can, even if you're not pregnant, or if you want to do this, as especially, so I'm talking to women for a second, cis-born women who have naturally developed breast tissue. If you have had top surgery and had your breast tissue taken away, the likelihood of you being able to breastfeed has gone down to next to nothing. So that comes into it as well. Nipples are not redundant for men or redundant after surgery. They do certain things, but they're maybe not okay for breastfeeding. So you can induce lactation. So why is lactation induced? It can be for adult feeding relationships, but if you think about things like if somebody wants to be really close to somebody and you haven't been pregnant and you're adopting a newborn who you think breast milk would be better for, you can have planned some form of induced breastfeeding. It can be done. You can prepare, but it's going to take a lot of work, and we'll have a look at why. So it's quite complex as to what triggers breast milk and why at any one time. So breast milk, lactation, that's what we can call it for this as well. It's got 3 hormones that are the real biggies when it comes to lactation. And what we have, so we have estrogen, which is a very female-based hormone, and it is present in men as well. You have progesterone as well, and you have placental lactogen, and there are also a few other things that come into that. So when all of those things start to correlate, especially towards the end of a pregnancy, you'll find a lot of women can squeeze their breasts and induce some kind of milk in some way, shape, or form, or they feel their breasts getting full, they play, push, poke, and milk can start to leak, or your breasts can feel really full and they can really, really swell up. When you deliver a baby, your level of estrogen and progesterone fall dramatically. Dramatically, that sounds incredible, doesn't it? However, as they fall, what you've got is a very important hormone called prolactin, and that will increase and that will initiate milk. When a baby is born, you've got different forms of milk that come out at different times. That's why somebody will also say to you, please try and breastfeed a baby if you can for the first few days without shaming people who cannot, because there's a lot of that goes on. There are some very strong people out there who say you must only breastfeed your baby, you must do this, you must do that. Fed is best. Well, there's a lot of proof for that as to the goodness it can do. So what you want to do, if you want to induce some form of breastfeeding, so this is not a medical advisory. I am not medically qualified to talk about this. Very few people are, even lactation experts, who turn around and say, let's help you get more milk going and let's help you start an adult feeding relationship. What I suggest you do, if you really want to find out, and I can hear someone's mic is on, so I'm just going to turn it off again. Sorry. So what you want to do is look up adult breastfeeding, how to induce lactation, how to I want to breastfeed a newborn baby. They're the sort of searches you want to put in. And there are certain drugs and different things that you can take. However, what I'm going to say, please, please, please turn around and make sure that you follow the right sort of advice online, and maybe go and see a breastfeeding expert and speak to a doctor as well. I mean, a doctor won't help you particularly and won't give you a medication unless you have an infant coming into your home. That's slightly different. I've always heard about the importance of estrogen, but never fully understood it. However, I'm not a parent, so a bit so ignorant to it. Well, estrogen is in all of us. It's got a lot of properties that are very good. From the it makes our soft tissue connections and fluidity. It helps with that. It does a lot of things, and it's a very female hormone. But that's a whole other workshop. Thanks. LMB says, I've started looking at women and men into age play, but they're not as popular where I am as daddies are. Usually for me, plays an elephant A&R, and I have practiced. And Isabella says, there are some sources on for groups on FET too, though don't take it as gospel. From what I've heard, they're useful though. Yes, they probably are. And I'm going to go into some of it. Can I just say, adult relationships where someone is fed don't necessarily fall into age play, don't necessarily fall into kink, and don't necessarily fall into sexual stuff at all. It's really important that you ask the person who's doing it why they want to do it, what they want to do it for, and everything else as well. So for some people, if we put it in kink, it might come into the whole, I'm going to induce lactation. It takes a lot of dedication. You need a medical grade pump, preferably, you really do, a very good pump. It's really difficult. So a hospital grade electric pump is really what you want, because you really have to start stimulating the suckling process. So it takes months and months and months of work. And also it takes preferably another adult to suckle to produce, and you take some specific drugs alongside that can really help you produce milk, and maybe some herbal remedies as well. Again, I am not giving medical advice, and I'm not telling you that you need to take these drugs. I'm going to inform you what's around. There is a distinct difference. Please be responsible for yourself. And I hope that that makes sense to most of you. So, it could be a kink thing. It could be a DS thing. It could be a dominance thing of, I want you to do this. It could be to make the person feel uncomfortable. It could be that they leak. It could be all sorts of things happen. But if you induce breast milk, if you create lactation in somebody, please be aware that they can get all sorts of infections. They can be very unwell, and they can have a shit ton of pain. It is an absolutely hideous thing to do if you're not going to help them process through it and then help them produce milk, because what you get with milk is a supply and demand situation. So if you're saying pump, 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 then stop, you are definitely going to cause some really exploded boobs. You might think that's lovely, but the sensitivity on those boobs is then phenomenal. Again, you might think that's lovely, but they could leak everywhere over their clothes. Yes, you can buy all sorts of pads and specialist bras and everything else as well, but please be aware of what you're doing responsibly. Most women partners really underestimate how long, difficult, and expensive, both in time and money, is involved in inducing. It doesn't happen overnight. If a kink thing, partners will generally not be interested in participating in pumping, suckling every 3 to 4 hours. And that's exactly the point, NMB. You need a hospital-grade electric pump. You are going to pump for 5 to 10 minutes 3 times a day when you first start. You need to up that for anywhere between 10 to 15 minutes every 3 to 4 hours on a regular basis. Even once or twice during the night while you are asleep, you have to wake up and you have to do this. It doesn't have to be for life, because you can dry up and stop it, can't you? But you've then got to pump for 15 to 20 minutes every 3 to 4 hours, preferably every 2 to 3. So when you then turn around about a month before you want to feed, you are talking about 20 minutes of pumping every 2 to 3 hours, maybe taking some kind of drugs, and during the night. This is a fuck off huge commitment if you think about it. Now, if it's not kink, it might be that somebody likes the taste. It might be that somebody wants the intimacy that it brings. It is an incredibly intimate relationship when you've got adult breastfeeding going on. Somebody has to learn how to latch on properly. There are people and experts and midwives who actually look at that as well. Dry nursing can also bring milk forward as well, depending on the person and their history. So what you've got to be very aware of, that hormone therapy might not be an option. You might not be able to take it. That might be a difference. There might be some drugs that you take, but then you've got to be very careful as well. Whatever drugs you're taking, the key here is pumping. It's inducing over breast tissue, but we'll go over that in a second as well. So we've got it. It's really hard. You really have to stimulate your nipples, get it going. And honestly, as a mum who's breastfed 4 of her kids and been in an adult nursing relationship, it's really, really difficult. Could a man technically breastfeed? A cis-born male technically breastfeed? The answer is yes, but it's very rare and very unlikely. So yes, a man can. So not all mammals are born with mammary glands. We have, to a certain extent, regardless of their gender, we do have some mammary glands. Men do. However, they are not developed in the same way in men as they are in cis-born women. I'm sorry I'm separating, but I'm separating because of the biology here and the difference that it makes as well. So the problem is men don't create enough prolactin to even get anywhere near breastfeeding. And that's the hormone that comes in and makes a really big difference here. Just seeing you. So Andy said, took the words out of my mouth. This is a huge commitment, which it really, really is. So prolactin is produced by the pituitary gland, which is at the base of your brain, and it helps produce milk in pregnant and or breastfeeding women. It makes a difference. Some men might have a lot of prolactin in their system. And if they do, they have the capacity to lactate. No one's going to give you prolactin, but it's fucking rare. And the one time it might come up is if a man has some form of cancer treatment that's impacting his pituitary gland. He might get hormone treatments for that. So that will create milk, if that makes sense. So it's very unusual. So when a girl comes into puberty to be a woman, her breast tissue grows. That's why we have boobs. That's what these things are. And men do not, on average. I understand weight can make a difference and everything else as well, but it's more of a decorative thing when it comes to men, really, and some sexual pleasure and bits and pieces. But so I read somewhere that men potentially do have the hardware to breastfeed, but they don't have the software to make it happen. So that's basically the premise. So men are very unlikely to manage breastfeeding. So often it ain't going to happen. Could it potentially happen? Yes, it could. Right. So what can you do about this? What are your options when it comes to breastfeeding? You're really going to have to look up adoption type things. That's the real thing. We say that breastfeeding is the gold standard. That's the thing that we want to do because it's a good thing for a baby. It can be really beautiful for an adult relationship as well. There's something about very attention focused giving. We know that when a baby is born and it latches on, and again, please watch videos on how to latch on, because if you just suck the nipple, you are going to cause an incredible amount of soreness and pain in the woman who is feeding. So what we have to do is, it's the way we induce, and we use our tongue underneath, and there's a specific form of opening the mouth against the nipple, and the tongue is underneath. I'm sucking my thumb here. And at the same time, as we're drinking, we're inducing with our tongue as well. It's a very fantastic little situation that the baby learns to do. And there are actually nurses and specialists who teach people how to latch on. LMB, I'm really happy with dry nursing due to the effects of oxytocin one can have, but partners are often lazy and don't want to read as to why they should learn the proper latch technique. What to speak of actually wanting to practice it. That's an important thing for the release. It really is. It makes a huge difference, doesn't it? Louise, are synthetic hormones required in women who have never been pregnant, such as me, similar to those used in hormonal contraception, which fool the body into thinking it is pregnant? No, they're not necessary, because you have the capacity to do it. So there are some drugs that you can buy over the counter that have some of the right hormones in that can really help us. And one of the main drugs, I'll come into it in a minute, is actually for an upset stomach. So, and a lot of women will take it. Can you induce lactation if you're on a hormonal contraceptive? Do you reckon it has an effect? It depends what's in the contraception, and it depends what hormones are in the contraception as well. So yes, it could have an effect. The more estrogen you've got going, however, if you listen to what I said at the beginning, when the baby is born, the estrogen and the progesterone drop, allowing the prolactin to come up and come in. So like as a woman who's had breast cancer and has to take an anti-estrogen drug, in some respects, I could induce lactation again if my estrogen levels aren't too low, but also aren't too high. So again, there's no specific that says this must be and this is the way that it is. So yeah, it's a difficult, but so you need a pump. You need a hospital grade pump. You need a pump that's going to be really effective for you. It's even if you've breastfed before, even if you're used to breastfeeding, you're going to have to start at the beginning each time. Again, it might be really good. You might be able to do something quite quickly, but we don't know for sure. So you have to be very careful. Some people use hand lactation. You can do it in a warm bath, hand pumping and hand pressing to help induce lactation. That can really good, especially in a warm bath, as I said. You can get very sore. If people don't know how to latch on, it really hurts. Some people will do it as part of sex. Some people will get aroused when they're doing it. So oxytocin is an interesting drug, and we're going to talk about oxytocin when we talk about jealousy as well and the impact on the brain. So we'll come back to that one. So it's all about a pattern, and it's all about inducing the right sort of hormones in a human being. Again, it can really hurt. You can buy nipple creams, you can buy all sorts of things, but you're really trying not to get an infection and not to block any of your ducts, because it can be incredibly painful. And it really is painful. Would it be, oh, sorry, I definitely had to relearn, oh, sorry, hang on, I'm missing a few because a Fet Life workshop thing came up. It is interesting when maybe an adult needs to be taught the suckling, whereas a baby would do it naturally. Not all babies do it naturally, and not all babies. So sometimes you have to put your finger in the corner of a baby's mouth, unlatch them and get them to start again, because they go in and sometimes they poof straight on the nipple, and that's when you've got all sorts of problems. You're maybe going to start to develop all sorts of infections and all sorts of things. Honestly, ask a woman who's breastfed a baby for a start. They're like little vacuums. They're very naturally into it, but they can be in the wrong place, and boy, that can really hurt. Isabella, I definitely had to relearn how to suckle. It doesn't come naturally to an adult. It really doesn't. Would it be easier for a woman to produce milk that had breastfed in her past before? Yes. However, if she is postmenopausal or perimenopausal or had some kind of hormone therapy for some kind of illness, it depends what. It depends. The answer is, who knows, piece of string, either if induced or dry nurse. Would it be easier for a woman? Yes. I mean, in theory, it should be. But yeah. Breast massage is really important. So if you want to induce lactation and you want to practice, make a fist. This is the way to do it. Make a fist and you massage your breast towards the nipple, towards the areola, all the way around. And that's what you do. So you just do this, especially in a warm bath. And you can push and squeeze. I can't believe I'm touching up my tits doing this, but that's what you're actually trying to do. So it's a fist shape, and it's the push and the pressure. My son, oh, sorry, hang on. I sometimes wonder if the technique is correct, because if one hasn't breastfed children before lactation, it's harder for me to know 100%. It is really hard to know. You start to get results. It can take ages. As I said, it's going to take 2 to 3 months minimum. One of the drugs that's really popular is Motilium, but I will go into that in a minute. So we're going to some prescription drugs as well. And despite the step-by-step instructions I have read, you also need no stress. I'm really sorry, stress impacts breast milk. You need to be really relaxed, and you're going to be fucking tired, because again, you need to be doing it every 2 to 3 hours for 20 minutes every single time. And that's hard, isn't it? My son had a pinhole in his lung, so they took him away and gave him a bottle. He was never able to latch after that. I pumped and gave it to him in a bottle. Yes, that can happen as well. My youngest daughter was born dying. She had something called imperforate anus, so she needed a colostomy bag. We were in hospital for, gosh, 8 months on and off. It was a horrific time, and they gave her a bottle. I thought I was getting mastitis. My milk was coming in. I could rest my chin on my boobs. I had a raging temperature. I really didn't feel very well at all, but I used a pump, and I fed her as well. I really made sure that I could feed her, because with a colostomy bag, that brings all sorts of different issues in, but that's a very long story. Isabella, what happened to the no touching on the Zoom? Yeah, no, I know, sorry, but I'm really trying to show people how to do things. I didn't do it when I talked about masturbation, put it that way. But all I'm talking about is the fist technique. It's really effective because you're trying to push through. It's a nice, gentle, moving technique that you can help and squeeze as well. The problem is, as I said, stress really inhibits production. So if you are stressed or you're not feeling when you're like, for fuck's sake, nothing's happening. Why isn't it happening? Sit there with a pump, make sure it's nice and on. Lots of people use different things. Depending on the sort of pump you've got, there can be all sorts of different materials and fabrics that you put over the breast. Some are more rubber-based, some are more silicone-based. They really vary. Some are hand pumps that you squeeze. That's quite hard on your hand. And as I say, a hospital-grade level of pump is really the one that's going to do everything for you. I mean, fucking hell, if you're a masochist, go and buy a goat or a pig milking pump. I mean, that will fucking really damn it. I mean, that will sort you out. don't do that. That they're incredible pressure and everything else as well. That was a joke. So a hospital grade pump will make a difference. You can buy really fantastic, they're little sets like this, but they can be hundreds of pounds. So this is a real commitment to doing something and making sure that you're doing those things. So when you are pumping, you need to relax, put on a nice TV program, have your partner stroke your hair if you're both doing it together, or they can suckle on the other side, for example. However, you need to keep things very even between both breasts. You don't want one this much bigger than the other. You know, you can get a lot of discomfort and a lot of pain, blocks, ducts, mastitis, other things, as I've said. And thrush, actually. Babies and people develop thrush in their mouth. And thrush, non-sexually, is passed around. My nearly 40-year-old daughter and her mum struggled to connect in the breastfeeding department, and the nurse midwives couldn't seem to help. But for some reason, I could connect the two with entirely no skills. Well, you are part of the family. There was probably less stress if you were particularly calm about it. I remember, so like my sister is a nurse and a midwife and a breastfeeding midwife, and she delivered my last two children. And I ended up in hospital with her, and as I said at the end. However, what was interesting is I breastfed Darcy and Brian. I breastfed all four of mine. And when she had her first daughter, she was determined to breastfeed because it's definitely the best thing that you can do. And when a baby's first born, you have that initial outtake of milk, what you've actually got is more of a yellowy fluid, which is called colostrum, which is very different than to the milk that follows. And colostrum is full of incredible things that really helps a baby develop, and helps develop their brain, and helps develop their coordination, helps them to develop immunity to certain conditions, and it can certainly help with things like eczema and other things as well. So it's a very positive thing to give. It's also quite high in calories. If you are somebody that's really going to worry about your weight, and I genuinely mean this, don't fucking breastfeed off your partner every single day. That stuff is quite calorific, especially colostrum, because it's meant to help grow this human being. That's what it's really meant for. But I remember my sister phoning me at one point and one night, screaming at me, telling me she can't fucking do this. It hurts too much. Because it's all well and good that you know these things. And as I say, she was a breastfeeding midwife. She really knew her stuff. But when you're trying to do it and your baby won't latch on and it's really hard, man, it's quite difficult. It really is. And you get this thing called the letdown reflex. So when a baby starts crying around you, if it doesn't matter even if you're in an adult nursing relationship, when you hear a baby cry or something starts to happen, believe me, you can then turn around all of a sudden and your breasts start to produce milk and you can leak everywhere. You can also actually shoot it a very, very, very far way. So, for example, if you're about to feed in somewhere like McDonald's and your breasts are very full and you're about to feed and you miss, that shit can shoot 3 to 4 foot across a room onto somebody else's table or anywhere else. Has anyone had that here? I mean, it really, really happens. So you've just got to be very aware of it as well. You've got to be very aware of the mess, the milk, and everything else as well, especially in an adult nursing relationship, especially if you're only going to meet your partner maybe once, 2, 3, 4 times a week. It depends. So you've got to be very aware of producing that really good connection between supply and demand. That makes a real difference. Luke's expression. Sorry, did Luke have an expression there? The amount of strangers that look at your boobs when you do it is quite interesting. So it's really good to use visualization techniques. Imagine flowing milk, have a nice scented candle. I didn't ask for milk in my coffee. Yeah, it is a little bit like that. Andy says, I can only imagine that bond that grows as a woman grows her baby inside. Is it felt that breastfeeding increases that bond? Yes and no. Any form of feeding increases that bond. When a baby is born, so it's the same for human beings as well, if you've got somebody latching on. If the person is watching you and you have this connection, what we know is that the neurons are firing in a baby's brain like this, like creating incredible synapses and neuron connections. We know that that's how a baby is like really starting to learn. Those things also happen in the mother at that moment as well. So actually, when you have an adult doing it, there is a real connection there as well that creates a difference. A point about colostrum is that many who are inducing lactation outside of pregnancy, the beginning milk is not actually colostrum because the hormone that only comes with pregnancy is not present when inducing lactation. Yes, that's absolutely correct. So I'm sorry, I was talking about babies. Yes, and it's that very heavy calorific format. It doesn't, so it's not the same because you haven't got the same level, and that's where your prolactin comes in and makes a real difference. So yes, I have read exactly the same. I'd agree with that. So other sensory stimulation. So you need to really feel that it could be that you have a picture of your partner feeding off you. It could be that you have a picture of a baby. It could be that you have sounds around you, maybe if somebody's suckling. It's a very specific sound when a baby or somebody feeds. So all of these things can really help you as well. Oxytocin really creates the milk letdown production. So it really comes in. Do you remember I said that that's what that is, where it really comes in? So if you want to help with oxytocin, a partner could do a hand massage that really increases oxytocin. Laughter increases oxytocin. It's a new drug, sorry, oxytocin. So laughter does. So you could watch a comedy when you're trying to use a pump to make a difference as well. Or you find someone really funny. And as I said, preferably do it in a warm bath. Careful with the pumping machine, or have warm breasts. So get yourself like a lavender cushion and put it on before. Get yourself hot flannels, different things. And as Isabella says, headspace in that regard is really important then as a question. And the answer is, yeah, that's absolutely right. It's really important to do. So there are drugs and different things that people can take to help you increase milk supply. The likelihood of you getting any form of drug from anybody to help you for an adult nursing relationship is this much. This much. You will not get it from anybody because you're not going to get help. If you happen to be breastfeeding or you're adopting a baby, you might well get help then as well. So there are drugs that really make a difference. So you've got metoclopramide. I really always forget how to say that. So these are prescription drugs. So you're really not going to get them. Domperidone. Now, domperidone is a really interesting one because it is present in other drugs that you can buy over the counter. And sulpride, that they're I think they're the three main versions of hormonal based drugs that will increase milk supply if you can get it on prescription, which you can't do. So as I said, prolactin is the really important thing here. So if you have a very low prolactin dose, somebody might give you some kind of drug to help you. And that's also connected. When you have a problem creating prolactin, it's sometimes connected to your dopamine levels as well. So how happy you are, how okay you are, really matters because dopamine keeps prolactin in check as such. So all of these hormones really have a lot of impact on us and breastfeeding as well. Of course, if you take some of these drugs, some of their side effects are absolutely horrific, from depression to feeling really ill, actually. Honestly, nausea, diarrhea, vomiting, absolutely horrific. Some of these side effects are from these drugs. The most popular one, however, it's now not so available in the US, is domperidone. And if you look up domperidone as to what it's in, you'll find it in over-the-counter drugs for upset stomachs like Motilium. So what a lot of people will do, and this is not advice, I am not giving you medical advice, please don't hear this as any form of medical advice, is that if you look it up and have a look, what people will do is take Motilium at a slightly higher level, because it contains some domperidone and other drugs in it, to try and make sure that they can give milk in some way, shape or form. It's the safest one, the drug that you can. And metoclopramide definitely is less safe, and the sulpride is definitely less safe after that as well. So, but there are also some natural things that you can do as well. So how can you help increase, I'm so sorry, does domperidone transfer through milk? No, well, any drug will slightly come through milk. That's the answer. But the domperidone, if you're taking it as a Motilium, is a drug that helps with upset stomachs and stomach cramps and twisting and inflammation mainly. But most drugs will come through milk in some way, shape, or form, even to the fact that if you have if you smoke a spliff, it will come through your milk. That's why we're always telling people not to do these things. Alcohol will come through your milk, all of these things. And most drugs will come through your milk in some way, shape, or form. The question is how much. So I was like, oh no, wait, yeah, it does a little bit. So it does come through. Andy, I may be jumping the gun. Is there a connection between trauma, slightly later in life, to adults wanting to suck on another adult's breast in terms of feeding? That's a really good question, isn't it? Trauma creates a disconnect in most human beings. I didn't think I'd get a question like this, so that's interesting. Trauma creates a disconnect because of the impact that it has on the brain and how we respond to it. What we want when we are traumatized is a connection that isn't harmful to us. So a breastfeeding relationship could be very nurturing. And if someone feels really hurt by abandonment, a lack of parenting skills, or different things from parents, it could be that nurturing could be very lovely for somebody. So it, again, you're going to have to ask the person, why do you want to breastfeed? What's your history? What happened to you? What's here? Look, even pregnant mums do not produce enough milk on average. We really worry about this stuff. So you've got very full boobs, it goes down, comes back up again, goes down. As I say, it's all about supply and demand. However, it's around 75% the figure of new mums who breastfeed their babies, for example. So I'm talking about babies as well. However, most stop within the first few months. So it's not a very common thing that people carry on and on and on. And the biggest worry is insufficient milk production, because you can't see, you can't measure it in a bottle, but it doesn't matter because your baby will stop when it's had enough. Adults, different, aren't they? So if you want that connection, why are we doing it? Are we doing it because we want the milk? Are we doing it because we want the connection? Are we doing it because we want to experience the oxytocin between both of us? Do we want to experience the intimacy? Are we doing it from a kink perspective? Are we doing it from a sexual turn-on perspective? So again, it's all about the perspective and the approach. That's what really matters. So you have to be very aware of why you're doing it and how it works. The thing is supply and demand. So if you want more milk, you're going to have to breastfeed more. So if your partner, because boobs are great, yeah, there is that as well. However, some people really get the ick factor around milk, don't they? They're like, oh no, that's not okay. I really wouldn't like that. It's leaking, it's not okay. Because some people are very much of the mind that milk is just for babies. And some people are of the mind, no, milk is for me and I really want it and I really love it. And some people might come from the boob perspective of, I'm a boob owner. Nope, get off it. That's just for my baby. And others will turn and say, nope, I want to feed my partner. I want that intimacy with somebody in some way, shape, or form. That makes a difference as well. So when you're triggered to produce and you're like, oh, so, and you've got all of that going on, that letdown reflex is when those muscles contract and go, and then the milk moves through the ducts. So the more you breastfeed, the more you produce milk. It's like that sound, because that's what it feels like. I don't know how else to describe it. If you've ever had a letdown feeling, that's kind of what it feels like. It's like just comes out. It can even sound like that sometimes. You can actually hear it. And as I say, if you want to establish a breastfeeding pattern with a baby, you're feeding between 8 to 12 times in every 24 hours. Guess what you've got to do in an adult nursing or an adult breastfeeding relationship? I don't know about you, I don't have the time for that. If you think that it's going to take 20 minutes every 2 hours, this is such a lot of work. It really is. And lots of people just don't have that time or capacity to do it. So we have to be really aware of what people can manage as well. So you can pump between feedings even. So that can mean every hour or so. It makes a difference. You really, please make sure if you're going to breastfeed anybody that you breastfeed equally between both sides. It really makes a difference. You can have a look as well. There are some people who turn around and make something called lactation cookies. Have you heard of those? Anyone? Lactation cookies. You can buy them from Amazon, and you can make them yourself, because they have certain herbs in that help people lactate. Thanks for the sound effects. I really could never pronounce this word, right? So I'm going to give it a go. I think it's pronounced galactagogues, something like that. So I get this wrong. So galactagogues, if that's the right pronunciation, anyway, it doesn't matter. Look up lactation cookies. And they've got flaxseed in, oats, yeast and a few other bits and pieces as well. And you can actually look at recipes. And they can really help. So some people say that they really work. One of the natural herbs that everyone talks about is fenugreek. Fenugreek, brewer's yeast makes a difference. So you can look up all these natural drugs that you can take. Jerry, I had a friend, a woman who was really into A&R and desperate to find a reliable, genuine male partner that would suckle from her. She had very little luck. Once she messaged me out of the blue and she asked me to bind her breast with rope. And when I did, she went really calm and fell asleep. Oh. I've got a whole workshop written on the calmingness of being bound, of the relationship to swaddling as a child, the relationship to the feeling of safety, of not being able to move, of not being able to do anything, to relax and let go. And there is something about breastfeeding, whether it's an adult or a child, that there is this really gentle process of just doing nothing else. It is very stationary, still, and really lovely. So other things that can affect are things like garlic and ginger and everything else as well. However, if you start taking all this stuff, I mean, there's even some connection, I think, to spirulina and different things. All of this stuff that you are taking, any supplement that you are taking, can fuck up your system. So you really have to know yourself. I really think it's important for you to know yourself. Everything can make a difference. It really does. Keep trying, Debs. With what? What have I got to keep trying? Isabella, fenugreek ruined my hormone levels. Right? Yes, exactly. And I have PCOS pre-fenugreek, so polycystic ovaries, galactic. Oh, that I know. I can never get it just right. I tell you. Yes. So I'm saying with anything, it's like vitamins or anything. Anything you put in your body can impact how you are, especially if you're playing with stuff that you want to help increase things. That's why I'm saying I'm not giving any medical or okay advice here. You really have to have a look. The things that will cause low milk supply, that will make you maybe not feel so good. I banned my partner's breast recently and she slept like that. She said it calmed her. I must admit I was worried about it, but she said it felt fine. Look, if you're cutting off blood supply for too long, it isn't okay. Like if someone can't feel something, but that's a completely different thing about rope bondage. And that's where we go. Bound is very different to bound. Makes a really big difference. So it can be really lovely for people, and that calming, swaddling feeling. And breastfeeding can really do that for people. Yes, they are. Louise, they are. So they are plant hormones from supplements. You can get them as supplements as well. I love having my breast bound and held up. It's quite literally a weight off my shoulders. Fuck big boobs. Yeah, I'm not the smallest of people as well. I like a bra that can really hold me up. That said, is this a bit personal? When I take my bra off, I'm a really lucky 56-year-old woman in that they don't drop dramatically. And that makes a real difference as well, because when you feel the weight and the pressure, it's really not pleasant. So sometimes that uplift can help. And if your breasts are full of milk, ironically, they do lift and they do swell up. They don't just drop, they swell. But of course, the more breastfeeding you do, some of the argument is sometimes that can make the boobs drop more. It does change. At Bella, Jerry laughed and Zoe said snap. And Andy says, I was worried about blood flow. If you're worried about blood flow, keep an eye on the person. Don't fall asleep and think you're going to sleep for 8 hours. It's your responsibility. Keep an eye on the person and make sure that they are safe and that they are okay. It's really important. If you're worried about something, then that is a potential problem. Please do something about it. Right. So the things that are going to really stop you from breastfeeding are the amount of breast tissue you've got, or how it is, or what chemicals and different hormones you've got in your body at any one time. If you are stressed, as I've said, if you have chronic anxiety, anything that is stressful can really interfere with the whole letdown reflex process. So you have to be very aware of that. You need to make sure you are very calm and in a non-stressed space and environment to help with it. You might have medical conditions like PCOS is one classically as well. That can interfere with milk production. Diabetes can interfere as well. And if you have preeclampsia, which is very high blood pressure, pregnancy induced. Aren't many breast blood vessels sufficiently below the surface to not worry about blood constriction? Well, it depends how long for, doesn't it? So like any tissue, if you tie it tight enough for long enough, will get some kind of damage. and it will get some kind of damage. We can't, I mean, Jesus Christ, bras cause us an incredible amount of breast tissue damage in some way, shape, or form. They're not particularly good for us, especially if they don't fit properly. The wires are incorrect and everything else as well. So everything can cause some kind of damage, even if it's not just about blood. You can, if you've got a skin tag or anything else as well, and you tie it up sufficiently, it will drop off eventually. So that's, you know, Jesus. If you can buy for play, there's a little machine. Well, it's not a machine, it's a little, you squeeze it and it's got these 4 points on the end like this, and it's for goats. So the reason they use it for goats is they tie it very tightly. I can't remember what these things are called, but they come with little rubber bands, and you expand them massively. You put them over a goat's or a pig's balls, you tighten the elastic, you take the machine away, and eventually their balls, because of restriction, just drop off. It's a form of animal castration. And lots of people use that tool on nipples. And I'm like, oh, okay. But for too long, or, you know, even around anything else as well, anything can drop off. And yes, you always hear about how women love to take off their bra. LMB says, the bras, Tempest, calm and anxiety free. So completely like having a newborn baby. Exactly right. I mean, fuck me. Let's have a baby to save our relationship. Okay, you do that. LMB, I usually tell women who want to lactate in the future to be aware that certain play can affect some of the milk ducts that once damaged do not regenerate. But do you know something about what actually will damage the milk ducts? I say it as a precaution to women who are into hard play, but I do know women have gone on to lactate, so perhaps you know something about this, how careful to be. My girlfriend feels attacked by the baby comments. Sorry, Isabella, and that's why I usually just don't wear bras, says Mary. Right, so if you cause damage to a milk duct, often there are plenty of milk ducts around that can help. If you're going to burn off nipples, if you're going to use cigarette play or cigar play or burning, you are going to cause permanent damage and blockages. Red, sorry, but that's the truth. And you know, I only heard of that recently. I was talking about how male submissives take a lot, and a friend of mine said the worst thing she ever saw was a dominatrix do this to a man who just said, yeah, sure, that's fine, but didn't really think about the implications. So burning, so with pens, cautery pens, anything else as well, anything that's going to block the milk duct and damage the areola. So because it's very much the areola and around, that's where you've got the way the tongue works as well to induce lactation, and then the milk ducts all around the nipple. So any form of burning, any form of damage, if you keep bruising and you keep causing blood clots as well, because that's what a bruise is. It's not a clot, but it's bruising on the surface. That can cause some damage too. However, most people actually can, even with quite a lot of breast tissue damage. It's a heap of shit to say that breast tissue damage causes cancer. It does not. And why do I know that? Believe me, I've spoken to about 4 or 5 oncologists about it because of my own history around this. It's one of those fallacies that gets thrown around that says, if you cause tissue damage in that area, you will cause cancer. That's not how cancer works. Please read up about the difference. So the likelihood of you causing massive damage actually isn't really going to make it a lot of issues. It's really just burning, cautery pens, electric play that burns or scars. So anything that's going to scar that could impact the milk duct as well. That makes a difference. Yeah, cigarette burning on nipples freaks me out. But yeah, it's not the best thing, isn't it? So impact play around the areola shouldn't really make any difference. It wouldn't, well, not shouldn't, it doesn't really. Again, I'm not medical, so please don't take my word for it. Read about it, have a look, do some investigative research yourself. Please make sure that you find these things out. So impact play will cause bruising and it could cause swelling, but it won't necessarily cause long-term damage. And there are quite a few milk ducts when you have a look at a woman's nipples. Please be careful as well if you're on different medications, as I said. So some birth control pills that we mentioned earlier will have an impact on whether you can produce milk. But interestingly, if you have some allergies and you have to take certain medications, is it pseudoepinephrine? Fucking, what's wrong with me today? That can make a real difference. So allergy medications can also stop milk. Smoking, so whether it's on nipples or not, don't smoke and don't drink. If you have as I said, the one thing that will make a difference that I mentioned earlier as well is if you have had a breast reduction, lump removal, cyst removal, cancer removal, a mastectomy, or anything else as well, all of those things can interfere with lactation. And so can piercings actually as well. So if you damage the nerves that connect to breast milk production, then a piercing could potentially do it. So I'd also say don't do much play piercing if you want to do lactation. I would say that. But again, do your own research. Yes, it's completely dependent that's what I mean. Do your own research. So it's if it damages the nerves. So, you know, I think there's something very beautiful about adult nursing relationships. I think they're really lovely. And I think they can be very sweet and gentle and kind. And I think we really have to be aware that they are very beautiful. They're very personal. And I don't think we have a right to say whether somebody is right or wrong if they want to enter into any form of A&R or breastfeeding relationship. Totally respect anyone who can do it. And what I'm going to say is you've got to remember, I'm going to reiterate again, it could be a kink relationship. It could be a power exchange relationship when it comes to breastfeeding. It can be purely sexual. It can be purely for feeding, and it can be purely for the connection that two people have and create. I guess as an age 65-year-old male and with a split nipple from a large nipple ring migrating, my chances of feeling, yes, they'd be very low. And piercings can cause the rainbow sprinkler effect. Yes, cuts and all sorts of things can. Cutting as well, actually, I should have said cutting. And that's what appeals to me about them. As I was told my piercer that his location wouldn't affect my breastfeeding, I assume this isn't a guarantee. No, because, well, that's an interesting one, isn't it? Look, piercers should really know where everything is and really know what they're doing. However, that says that every human being is exactly the same and they should have everything in exactly the same place. It's not quite like that, is it? We're all a little bit different and we all have slightly different bodies. Like I know when I go to the dentist, they have to put in a lot more anesthetic than for other people. So they always get the gold one out for me because it's slightly misplaced. And that happens in things like hypermobility spectrum disorder and Ehlers-Danlos, that people need a lot more. So you never know. If you've got something else going on, then nothing is a guarantee. And redheads. Yep, redheads are their own unique human beings when it comes to pain and when it comes to how they handle all sorts of things. They have slightly different genes. So redheads have a big impact as well. I haven't looked at any research around redheads and breastfeeding. I don't know what the connection is at all or if there is any. I've never found any. So that would be another interesting form. But, you know, adult breastfeeding isn't really very researched or spoken about, the same as adult babies aren't or anything else as well. Some adult babies will want to breastfeed, but not all. This is the point. Mutants we are, says Fiery Unicorn. I'm not a mutant, but anyway. And in fact, it's going to be one of those genes that are going to go backwards. Shoddy lack of preparation there, Debs. Oh, don't. Jesus. I'll take that to heart. And I have to go and find a piece of writing on bloody redheads and lactation, but I have looked. I don't think that's true, Tempest. I would like to see the scientific research behind that redheads produce strawberry milk. I mean, you can make jokes, can't you, with people? One's Coca-Cola, one's orange juice. We've had that a lot. Lance says, I have a friend whose entire abdominal cavity is reversed, really messes with diagnosis when he goes to the doctor. I bet. And that's my point. You know, nothing is a guarantee because actually we're all very different biologically, yet we're all the same. But, you know, somebody says, oh, no, that's a bit different in you. And for example, I keloid scar because I definitely have the genes that are related to hypermobility because my daughter has it really badly. So when I scar, and my skin's a bit more translucent as well, and hers is very. When she had her breast reduction surgery, it took 4 years, 3 to 4 years, for the last hole to close completely. So it's just a very different process. We're all slightly different. Fiery Unicorn, I had absolutely no issues when feeding my daughter and produced enough milk for a small army. Yeah, I've never seen a piece of research about redheads having a problem. However, redheads do react differently and have different genetics when it comes to pain, the way they process pain and the way they process the way that they feel things physically. There is a difference in the gene that causes red hair. It does cause that as well. LMB, the intimacy level through A&R can be so much that my male play partners can start worrying that I'm becoming something more and want to backtrack. I need to explain that it's temporary and hormones creating the feeling, not that it isn't actual affection, but usually, no, yes, I completely agree with you. It isn't love, it is oxytocin, which is that drug. We're going to cover that in a minute. If they can accept that and they can relax and enjoy it. Yes, so oxytocin can really make us feel very connected. It's called the connection hormone, isn't it? That's what it's about. And the redhead gene is MC1R, in case anyone wants to look it up. Okay, I'm going to say something really sensible here. If you plan to play with a redhead, fucking look it up. It's really important because their whole pain principle is different to me with dark blonde hair. So ask people and look it up as well. I think I've written about it in my pain writing. I might be wrong, but I think I have. The thing is, Jacob, not every redhead knows about it. Shocking as it is, they might know, unless you're into pain, they might know that they respond differently, but actually they haven't looked it up and looked up the side effects and as to why. So the redhead themselves may not know. That happens as well. And I agree, you should always ask the person first, but they might not necessarily know. You could say to a redhead, say, well, because your pain can be very different because of the MC1R, and they'll say, is it? I mean, I thought that was just something, I just thought I was a bit different to everybody else. So, it's educational as well. Fiery unicorn. Yes, thank you. Louise, I'm the same. 3 injections of anesthetic for me, spread out. Have to go private for this. Private dentist told me this is due to dense bone. Don't know if it's accurate or not. Look, I don't think it matters as long as you get enough. Just don't make it hurt, please. Yes, we did a workshop about redheads a while back, didn't we? I don't think I did a workshop about redheads. I think I was talking about pain. And because I was talking about pain, I did very much have a look at MC1R and tell people about it and the difference that it makes, because I speak about it a lot. Scott's rule in the redhead stakes. Yes, we did, Dawning. We did. So we covered it under pain. My anaesthetist was surprised I knew I'd need more anesthetic. Yeah, people do. Okay, can we leave breastfeeding? Because I've done a whole hour on that and I really want to get onto jealousy and a little bit about childhood fantasies. Yes, it was in pain tolerance. Same here, Karis. Yes, people do. So let's talk about jealousy. Who here has ever been jealous in their lives or envious about anybody? In any way, shape or form? Anyone experience jealousy? And perspective matters when it comes to pain. Chronic pain patients who live with constant pain will call 1 to what most people call 5, or will call 10 because they can't bear anymore. It really varies. So that's not always necessarily fully true. So it's really important to understand the difference. Yeah, who hasn't? Well, some people don't feel jealousy. Actually, depend on neurodiversity can mean a very little jealousy. It depends how emotional you are. So people are saying, yep, I get jealous sometimes. Temper says, who hasn't? Naomi says, yes. Dawning, Andy says, yep, been jealous. Taz says, yes, not me. Never jealous. Liar. I have almost everyone. Jealousy versus envy. Yeah, so I mean, this is something I've spoken about quite a lot, and I will go through jealousy versus envy and a little bit, so we'll go as quickly as we can. I don't feel it. I experience compersion, and we'll come on to that as well. It's hard for me to distinguish between jealousy and insecurity combined with fear or loss. That's because they are kind of the same. We go into that a little bit as well. The very basic difference between envy and jealousy is that when you are envious of somebody, what you're after is there's an unhappiness or a malcontent about somebody else's okayness. Well, I want what they've got, they shouldn't have it. Whereas jealousy is a fear of loss or a worry about what could happen to you in a way. So envy is I don't want you to have it. Isabella says, sorry, I can't stay much longer, but thank you so much for this. Very welcome. So jealousy is an interesting one. It's a fear of loss. We don't really know what it is. And jealousy isn't just exclusive to romantic relationships. It's in every relationship. It can be amongst siblings, and that can be envy as well. It can be around parents. It can be around, oh God, she loves you more than me. That sort of stuff if you've got a child. It can be at work, it can be anywhere we can experience jealousy. So it's quite interesting. But what it really is about is it's a mixture of emotions rather than one singular pure emotion in and of itself. It's a mixture, and it's very much related to our cognition, our thinking, our self-esteem, and it's very much related to culture, because different cultures experience jealousy and envy in very different ways as well. So there are, when it comes to partners, we can have sexual jealousy and emotional jealousy. So we can be really worried that our partner's having sex with somebody else, but then we might turn around and say something like along the lines of, but just tell me you don't love them. You know that bit in Love Actually, when she says, is it sex without love, which maybe I can be okay with, or even worse, is it sex and love? I don't know if you remember that very small sentence that Emma says at one point. Emma, like I know her, fucking hell, I don't know her. So, you know, like that. So that's the sort of thing. So that there's a slight difference in those. So, and of course, that emotional jealousy is, do they love someone else? Does that mean they still love me? How will I feel about that? What's the difference as well? And of course, it's very different when we talk about polyamorous relationships, ethical non-monogamy. If you really read anything about polyamory or ethical non-monogamy, some people will say it's abnormal to have jealousy. This is what they used to say. You can't have it. Nah, fuck that. Jealousy is a very normal feeling to have. Coca family says, she also says, knowing things will always be just a little bit worse. Oh, I know, it always makes me cry. It always makes me cry when she opens the fucking CD as well instead of the necklace. Oh, I watch that every Christmas. I really like it. Yeah, so, you know, what we're talking about here is security and emotional attachment as well. So we can look up attachment disorders, we can look up all sorts of things. Some people are just jealous. I have a client, by the way, I always have permission if I say I have a client. All of my clients, not all, that's not true. If I say something about a client, I have 100% their consent to do so. So I have a client who's breaking up with his girlfriend, and it's really very sad. But she would check his phone every day. She would have access to his DMs on all of his social media, all of his passwords, and everything else as well. If he once deleted a message, he'd spent quite a few £100s for her birthday to take her out. He's only a young lad. That's an awful lot of money. He knew that a friend had sent him a message, so he deleted it. She saw that he deleted it. She blew up about it. So, you know, I don't think that's healthy in a relationship. I don't know about you. You are entitled to privacy in a relationship. Privacy is very different to secrets as well. And it makes a difference. So there are many hypotheses about jealousy. Some people say that jealousy is innate, that we are born with it. It's more, sexual jealousy is more common in men because we say that, you know, they own us. I mean, maybe that's really relevant in kink, isn't it? In BDSM, but there's a sense of ownership. So there's the one penis policy that can come in. No, we're doing this. This is what we're doing, and this is what it looks like. However, that because we follow very different reproductive strategies in our lives, that actually women will experience jealousy in a completely different way. So the idea is that under this innate theory, the innate hypothesis is that men will turn around and say, I want as many children as possible. So we're talking about evolution. Male sexual jealousy equals reproductive uncertainty. Yes, that sort of principle. But then women are left with, I know that's my baby, therefore I'm okay. However, fuck me, you've all got a brain. We've all got a capacity to think and everything else as well. So women can feel more emotional jealousy. Andy says, I think my jealousy episode was when I was younger, about maybe a girl who was with someone else or something. But recently my female partner expressed she maybe wants to play with a female partner. And I'm like, yes, cool, do what makes you happy. Life is too short. This ain't no dress rehearsal. And however, Andy, what I'm going to say to you, you might say that. However, as soon as that sort of thing starts to happen, you might have a very different response when it's actually happening. I'm not saying you will, I'm saying it's possible. So we just have to be really aware of what will I do? How will I comfort myself? And how will I feel about that? Lance says, hard part of jealousy is recognizing when you experience it regarding an ex-partner is and how you process and deal with it. I have it all the time regarding my ex, whom I still live with. Emotionally, it hurts. Cerebrally, I can deal with it relatively easily. It's being able to shut down the emotional response. I don't think it's about shutting down the emotional response. I think it's about accepting that we're having a feeling, and I think it's working out how to soothe it. I don't think we should put emotional responses in boxes and shut them off. I think that's negative for us, and I don't think it's very good. It's like, I think we have to learn to process it and work through it. What's happening here? Why is this happening to me? What am I really afraid of? Shit. And to get in contact actually with what's really going on underneath, and that's a fear of loss, or a fear of not being okay, or a fear of not being good enough. It's mainly around loss. So I think it's more important to have a look at why rather than shut it down. And Jerry's saying the same thing. What was interesting though is that actually human beings aren't just innately born with jealousy. It's not something that we have. So it's not a biological innate cause. A private message says, I'm in a long-term poly relationship that was supposed to be KTP. His other partner wanted parallel. So, okay, so kitchen table poly, which is very joint and talking about it all the time. His other partner wanted parallel. That's where two things happen. It's like a test, isn't it, with all these things? Thank fuck I know what you're talking about. So parallel happens the same in a process. I'm being forced to do parallel in order not to force her to do kitchen table poly. This is one of the problems, isn't it? We have very different formats and approaches to how things are, and actually it can make us feel very, very shit. This makes me feel like her needs are more important than mine, but I'm not sure if it's just jealousy. I don't ever want to lose him. Well, I'm not sure if it's jealousy followed by I don't ever want to lose him. There's a connection there. So when we talk about loss, we talk about jealousy. So the problem is, and jealousy is about loss. So that's a real fear underneath all of that, isn't it? Look, somebody will always take precedence. I'm really sorry, but even in polyamory, it can never be fully 100% equal. If you think it can, think again. Because when someone needs to go to hospital for something and you're out for dinner with someone else, if you're partners to both of those people and this person needs you to go to hospital with them, you're very likely to say, I've got to go, I've got to leave, I'm going. There will always be a choice and a consequence factor that comes into these things when it comes to jealousy. So we have to be really aware of them. Lance says, shut down, poor choice of the verbiage, channeling it would be better. Yes, it would be better. Right, so let's have a little look about jealousy and what happens in the brain. The biggest insight we have into this is actually about oxytocin and vasopressin, which if you look at neuroscientific research, it was all about the prairie vole. So they tell us a lot about jealousy, believe it or not. So prairie voles are very strictly monogamous. They have a lifelong bond that's it. They're with that vole, that's it. They nest together, they look after each other, they groom and pick at each other and make sure that they're both okay all the time. And they bring up their children, their babies, children, they're not children. They bring up their offspring together on a regular basis. So Andy says, I've yet to cross that bridge and can't guarantee how I would feel, but on the surface, I feel okay about it. Yes. So have lots of preparation for in case you don't, and how wonderful if you don't need it. Have lots of conversations, work out how to have conversations afterwards as well. Coca family, I'm so insecure and fearful that I'm not good enough that I get jealous at the drop of a pin. I think my jealousy is more rooted in the fact that my relationships are not secure. I am going to say to you, I would go and see someone about that, because I don't think it's necessarily that your relationships are secure. I'm just going to let this dog out to drive me mad. It's not necessarily that your relationships are insecure. It's your insecurity impacting your relationships in some way, shape, or form, because it might be around attachment. It might be around a lot of things. So it's really worth having a conversation. How do you recognize if someone actually doesn't experience jealousy and just unable to experience emotions, or just incredibly reserved? Hard to put this into words. Right, so the problem is if you have somebody who's neurodiverse and has some kind of, is on the autistic spectrum, so ASD, and other reasons, there are lots of different neurodiversities. That means people aren't as in touch with their emotions. It's about care. And Andy says, I would add, we do talk openly about these things. Absolutely, for sure. Let me go back to voles for a second, otherwise I'm going to get lost. Sorry, and I'll come back to all of this and hopefully it comes in. There's also another vole, which is completely different. So I think they're called montane or something as well. But these voles are complete and utter fucking sluts and whores. They fuck anything that moves. The males do, the females do. They're all at it together all the time, mate multiply. And it's really interesting. If a male is around, the female of this montane vole will immediately go into the capacity to fall pregnant. It's like a biological response. It's really interesting. So how can these two animals have such different behaviors when they are genetically so terribly similar. So what they did is they had a look at their brains, they researched them, and they tried to work out what was happening with them. And what they found was that the neuropeptide that we're talking about here is oxytocin, and its receptors in the brain. So if you have oxytocin in your blood, it helps you with milk production and it helps contract your uterus. So like, we don't want oxytocin to be too high a little bit too early in the pregnancy, because it can cause all sorts of problems and issues. Don't want to go into that. Don't want to trigger anybody. However, in the brain, it's completely different. So when oxytocin is in our brain, do you remember I said the word pair bonding earlier? It's all about connection. So it creates a connection. So, and what's interesting is that when they looked at the voles, the montane voles have next to no receptors when it comes to oxytocin in the brain. And where it is in the brain, it's in one of our reward neural pathways, which is the nucleus accumbens. So it's really interesting. Oxytocin also makes us less fearful, less scared, less aware of what's happening around us, because we'd be like, oh no, I feel really good. So, you know, it can be, it's different. It has a different impact. So it reduces responses to us feeling negative about anything. So we think, or research thinks, I don't, research states that oxytocin does the same thing to humans as it does. So when people were given intranasal oxytocin as a sniff, they have a very different response to women, to attractiveness, to different things. When they're married, but they have a very different response as to when they're single. So oxytocin promotes fidelity. Isn't that crazy? In human beings, the more oxytocin we have, which is why sometimes when polyamorous people are madly in love, they're not always as likely to go looking for more partners in that moment. They might look for more partners as their oxytocin reduces. Not always. I understand that. And I'm not saying anything. I'm polyamorous. I'm not saying anything against us in any way. What I'm saying is the research says that the more oxytocin you have in your system, the more likely you are to be not monogamous, but very close and bonded to that person and less likely to go elsewhere. So oxytocin makes a real difference. So if you have a certain number of oxytocin and vasopressin receptors in your brain that are quite high, we could turn around and say, well, people might naturally be monogamous then in some way, shape or form. If you want to read about this, go and have a look at the Compassion Sadist work. He's got a whole piece on this. It's very much saying what I'm saying. It doesn't quite work that way though. So it isn't about it stops us from doing anything. It's about the proof of love, which has just been fucking, it's bollocks, isn't it? We don't necessarily have to be monogamous, and some of us want monogamy, but has that been taught to us? Are we saying there is a relationship somehow with vasopressin, there is a relationship with oxytocin, we don't fully know what it is yet? Is society, does it make a difference about monogamy, about what people should be doing? Yes, it does. And jealousy really impacts us as far as that's concerned. I've got a really big writing on this called A Fair Bit About Jealousy. So you can read that as well. Jealousy, what I'm saying is that the jealousy isn't a them problem, it's a me problem. We need to talk about me. I'm the one feeling the jealousy. Look, people have actions and do certain things all the time that can make us feel insecure. If people want to cheat, they'll cheat. Even in polyamorous relationships, you see cheating still happening. Why? So people who are really free, open relationships, polyamorous relationships, ethical non-monogamy, it's when the ethical goes out the fucking window sometimes. People still cheat. So it's a real mixture of feelings around humiliation, around fear, around loss. So we can feel jealous for all sorts of reasons. As I said, I think people do confuse envy and jealousy. Jealousy is very different. This is very much about yourself and what you're about to lose. We often say, as I've said earlier, some of that research says, oh, women are more likely to be jealous. You know, they're more, and you know, they're so more in touch with their feelings and everything else as well. It's all about loss. We all have the same triggers and the same potential for loss. You could argue that in the good old days when women couldn't earn money, when women didn't have rights to property, they were property, let alone having rights to property, and they weren't independent, that of course they might be jealous, because they're jealous because everything is about to fucking implode on them for them and with them and around them. So historically, you can argue that jealousy is a very culturally led principle for women in that situation. However, children are jealous. If you really watch them, Jerry, oh, I miss them good old days. Lucky I know you. Tempest says, bollocks, women are just generally more in touch with their feelings. Are they? That's a really good question, isn't it? Or is that a very taught thing? I don't know. Culturally, life experience, environment makes a really, really big difference. Jealous behavior can also be really related to trauma, psychological disorders, insecurity. If you look at somebody who, for example, has emotional unstable personality disorder, it's really difficult, that one. So it's a push me, pull me relationship. And there's a lot of jealousy because of the fear of the trauma of what's going to happen. That makes a difference as well. So as I say, that evolutionary aspect is a little bit of bollocks as well. There's also quite a lot of research around monkeys as well. TT monkeys, they created sexual situations to create jealousy with TT monkeys as well. And they put females and males in a watching position so that they did brain scans and hormone testing levels to see what was happening for them. And they found that the male monkeys who were jealous, it impacted TT monkeys. No, it's not titty, it's definitely TT. I can get that one right. I'm very honestly sure of that. I think it's TI. It's definitely not titty monkeys. I don't know where your brain's going. So it's interesting. So the jealous males showed a massive rise in testosterone, elevated levels, and cortisol, which means that they were stressed as well. They were really stressed, and they would check out what's going on all the time. When aren't women more in touch with their feelings? They're more capable of verbalizing their emotions, among other things. Do you know what? I'm really going to say something strong here. They ain't born that way. Estrogen and different things can make a difference around crying. If you have a lot of testosterone in your body, you're less likely to cry, regardless of your gender. And if you have more estrogen in your body, you're more likely to cry. So testosterone is a crying blocker. What do we mean by emotions and feelings? Often we relate or conflate that to emotional massive responses like crying or hysteria. Well, that's got to do with testosterone and estrogen. Women are more likely to have more estrogen. Men are more likely to have more testosterone. That's the way it is. However, within those groups, people have different levels. Men aren't taught to be in touch with their feelings. That makes a fucking difference as well. Angel says, I cry all the time. So do I. Actually less recently because my estrogen is inhibited. We're all capable of doing it. Male culture makes us repress certain things, for sure, including jealousy. But jealousy is very allowed as emotion in men. However, it's often shown as a form of violence. It's often shown in domestic violence, and it's often shown in control. And that's where jealousy becomes very violent, very aggressive, and very dangerous for most of us most of the time. You don't need to be jealous in order to bond. You don't need to be jealous in order to be with somebody. And that's what's really important. So what we think is the left frontal cortex of the brain, what we think is happening there, if you look at all the research, which deals with emotions like shame, is very much involved. And that's impacting our dopamine system, which is kind of okayness, which regulates our okayness, our happiness, our reward systems. So jealousy can fire up our stress response, which is your fight, flight, freeze, friend, fuck, flop, faux, fawn system. There's lots there, lots of F's. People tend to know fight or flight. There are a lot more. So as I say, because we're scared, we're really frightened about what's about to happen because it is about loss. And that can make a real difference as well. Now, compersion, Roy mentioned that earlier, I think. So that's something as well. So compersion, when we look at things like cuckolding, hot wifing, stagging, vixening, cuck queening, all of those things within some BDSM relationships. If you don't know what they are, please ask. They're all about basically someone sleeping with somebody else. But meant to be maybe in a humiliating way or in a compersive way. So compersion could or could not be related to jealousy. The research hasn't been done. We don't know. But compersion is more about feeling, rather than feeling distress, someone's feeling joy, pleasure, and a real intimacy about, I really love that you're doing that. I get a really positive feeling from it. Dawning Andy says, it's interesting when you watch nature programs and you see hierarchy in the animal kingdom. Is jealousy natural there, or again, is it taught between generations of baboons, hyenas, etc.? The research isn't done as to whether is it cultural. However, some groups of animals don't have any form of jealousy and don't have any form of hierarchy and do really well. The animals that are closest to us, the mammals that are closest to us, when you look at things like apes, baboons, and monkeys and different things, so they're the most genetically related to us. They do show hierarchical structures, and they have a big difference. I don't know what that means, Leon, sleeping. Have I missed something? I'm really sorry. So jealousy can really hurt, and we have to look at it. And the reason some of us can feel jealous, as I said, is mental health. We can be neurotic. We can be possessive. We can have a low self-esteem. It might be some form of trauma that somebody's got. It might be abandonment issues. Even, as a couple, like, we're really worried about those things. And that can make a real difference as well. So please, if you are a person who suffers from any of those things, attachment issues, trauma, any of the things, please go and see someone so that you can work with a jealousy within you, so you start to feel better, so you can have relationships that you want. Because you say, oh, sorry, I made a mistake? I apologize. Grace, I didn't grow up knowing how to express my emotions. I spent a lifetime trying to bypass my intense emotions for fear they would drown me. Only just learning to recognize and verbalize this in the last 18 months. Oh, Grace. So the emotional wave, it's so interesting, isn't it? So the emotional wave lifts and lifts and lifts and lifts and lifts, and it increases, and we reach a point when we think, I can't fucking do this. And we're taught to manage and just get over, and then that's okay. However, if we're not taught that as a child, we get to a certain point, and by the way, a lot of people do this, we cut it off with something. And when we cut off that last bit, that last cusp, it's really complex, because people get really lost in maybe depression or anxiety or stress or OCD or something else as well. Oh, you mentioned sleeping with others. I've napped with others in a non-sexual way, but I believe stags, hot wives, etc. Yeah, so sleeping, sorry, sexual stuff. But actually, you could argue that somebody will have more of a problem with you sleeping with somebody and not having sex and being affectionate and gentle, will be more jealous of that than if you had sex. Think of the whole Pretty Woman situation of, yeah, no, I'm not kissing you though. You can fuck me, but I ain't going to kiss you because that's intimate. It's all about what we define as intimate, what we define as a problem to us personally. So that's quite interesting. Do I think jealousy fades with age? No, I think it depends on the person. I think we can be more aware of ourselves. I think we can have more of awareness of, like, I'm okay, so I can manage. That's very different. Naomi, jealousy can also be you really aren't getting attention you want and need, the aversion or real dislike of the other person or their energy. Yes, it can be as well, that my needs aren't being met here, and we have to learn how to say that. Declare and bought syndrome, you've put a link there. So what are you saying about that? Or does, I think that means does, or does apathy increase with age? Yes, I think there's an element of that, but I don't think it's just apathy. I think it's our awareness of ourselves, of others, of our okayness, our capacity to manage. Good point. I think the intimacy part may actually make me more jealous. Do you know, I've said this before, there was a writing many moons ago on FetLife about a couple who were really happy and open in their relationship, having, ethical non-monogamy. And she came home and she was like, hi. And he was in the room with the other partner, and they were like, hi, come on in. They just had sex and everything. She didn't mind. She was like, hi, I'm just going to put the shopping down or something. She put the shopping down and she went in and she was like, and I said this before, she was really devastated, not because they'd had sex, but they were using hers and his anniversary glasses to drink their wine. She was so hurt by that small action and that lack of thought that was devastating to her. So it's little things that can bring out jealousy for different reasons. But please see someone, because when we get really paranoid or we're really worried, it can absolutely ruin a relationship. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of resources. We can check, stalk, aggravate, really annoy people. Jesus, we put air trackers like those in their suitcases, or we're forever checking where they are on their phone. I remember stopping seeing somebody. And actually, I quite like someone tracking me on my phone if I'm in a relationship, if I'm in a controlling DS relationship. I quite like that. That can feel very good to me. But it's not for everybody. But I remember not seeing someone, forgot to take them off my phone, and I went on a date and they only fucking pinged my phone to find out exactly where I was, even after. And I was like, oh, just going to take that off. Please see someone, if only there were enough affordable people to see. There are charities, there are organizations. Do I think it's really difficult? I charge a fair amount, I think, from my experience, and there are loads of people that charge a lot less, and there are loads of people that charge a lot more. I also run these workshops, and I see 2 people for free every single week. So I'm giving up. I worked out the other day. I was talking to someone, so I'm giving up 1, 2, 3, 4, 8, 12, 16. I'm giving up the equivalent to about 18 to 20 hours a week. So lots of us do stuff. We really do. Territorial feeling, says Lance, goes back to a sacred and profane if you studied humanities. Yes, it depends what you study. You study humanities, sociology, psychology, all of those things. That's definitely how I got really jealous about when it started getting intimate and secretive and small things that weren't meant to be crossed, like hand-holding and affection. Look, I think it's nearly impossible to dictate what's going to happen in somebody else's relationship when they are together and you're not. Things develop, things happen, and you can say, oh, I don't want you to kiss them. But what if the other person really wants to kiss? We make decisions with couples that absolutely doesn't include the third party. And that's a real couple's privilege sometimes. So how do we work through that and make sure that we're okay? Lady Lilith says, how do you process and overcome these feelings of jealousy? If pushing down away isn't healthy, what is? Discussion. To talk about it. There's no cure, there's no strategy, but it's working out what's happening to this emotion in me. Why am I feeling this? What am I really worried about? And sometimes it can just be that we need to hear some words, that we need some time and attention from someone or that person. And we have to work against blame. We have to not act on it. That's so important when it comes to jealousy. What's really happening? Is it because you think you're going to lose them? Are you worried about being alone? Anything could be right. Don't attack the other person. Is this my anxiety? Is this my stress? And I'm just writing a piece on gossip, and actually there's a part in it about entrenchment. And when I see couples or polycules, a lot of people are so entrenched in their feelings, their emotions, and their perspective and their point of view that this has to be this way, and I'm right, and I'm going to fucking double down because I'm right, which is really unhealthy in a relationship. Why would you be scared about hand holding? Why is that so wrong? And how do we stop that from happening in somebody else? And I really understand. So the answer is about communication. It's about talking. It's about discussing boundaries. But it's really difficult to impose boundaries on somebody else's physical relationship, especially when things happen in the moment. It doesn't help. If we inflame and react and get really cross and attack, we're becoming defensive and we justify. Hand holding can be much more intimate than fucking. I agree. And can it be stopped sometimes? Like if you're walking along, the other person slips their hand into yours and you're developing a relationship with that person, and you go, oh no, I can't hold your hand because so-and-so said I can't. Well, that's very interesting now. Now, where do those two go because of what one person has said in another relationship? Or what that person needs to be is fucking 100% clear before they enter into the relationship with the other person. I have some limitations as to what I can do. I have some things that I'm allowed to do or not allowed to do. How do you stop catching feelings? How do you stop any of that? It's quite difficult. Carrie, sometimes people need to come to a conversation clean and leave all the previous conversations in the past, but it's such a difficult thing to do. It's really difficult. Grace is like saying no to falling in love. Yeah. Luke says, I think it was as he set the boundaries, he wouldn't. Oh, I see. So it's almost like he kind of let you down by saying, I won't do this, but then he did it anyway, but you didn't ask for it. Yeah, I think when someone says to you, I won't do any of that, I think what we have to say is, I think we need to be a little bit more open-minded that these things happen. I'm not going to believe that that's okay. Again, have a facilitated conversation with somebody if you're not good at this. Go and see someone just for a one-off who could help you, or somebody who's really used to this, like somebody who's a mentor in some way that can help you facilitate these conversations. Grace says, Lady Lilith, I had a metamor demand that and I told her she was too late. Yeah, that's half the problem, isn't it? By the way, I don't want you to do this. Oh, fuck, we've already done that. That was 4 weeks ago. Again, it takes lots and lots of discussion and clarity about how this is. If you force someone into a corner over this sort of stuff, that person will either react with shrinking and disappearing or coming out and fighting. So you're not going to have a good conversation. When you have a conversation with somebody, it can be really nice to sit on the corner each, hold hands and say, let's talk about this and let's work it through. And you have to see it through to the end. And that's not easy. I think the problem is when it comes to trust, you have to learn to trust yourself. I will be okay regardless of what happens here. I might be very sad. I might be very upset. I might be devastated, a lot of things, but I kind of know I'll be okay, which is something I say. We can't control others. We can't control situations that can happen. We can just look to ourselves to survive, to manage, and to work with ourselves. I think as well, when we feel jealous, the question we're asking is, what is this feeling informing me of? What am I not okay with here? What's the element that I'm missing in our relationship that I think they're going to get somewhere else? Or is it that it's good that they get it somewhere else, so they're not asking me for it? There can be positives as well. What is this jealousy informing me of? And how is that based in my own life? How has that impacted me from my own upbringing, my own situation, my own circumstances? What's happened to me there? That's another big thing to ask for. It really is about attachment theory. If you look at, I've written about jealousy, but if you read books like Polysecure, it really is about how did we deal with these things. I'm a virgin, so I'm very far from jealousy. I'm going to disagree with you on that one, actually, because jealousy isn't just about sex or virginity. It's about intimacy. It's about sharing. It's about someone comes in and says, oh my God, A and I were talking about, when I was 3 the other day, and it was really sweet. And the person says, you've never told me that story. Now, potentially we've got a problem. It doesn't have to be about virginity. It doesn't have to be about sex. It's about intimacy and the fear that that brings up. Grace says it's now a red flag. If someone says you can't fall in love, they don't want jealousy. Trying to control my feelings is a limit for me. Yes, because you can't control somebody else's feelings. If you aren't ready to be a metamor, don't be a metamor. If you think you can control someone fully, then that's never going to work. It's not. I think we have to look at it. What are we comparing? What are we comparing when we say that this is happening for them? So they must be having a really nice time. So they're definitely going to leave me, aren't they? Hang on, what are you doing in that relationship? What's really good there? What's happening for you that's wonderful? It's all about our core values. Feelings don't lead to actions as a default. They really don't. We have to take responsibility for how we feel. It's okay to be angry. It's not okay to be aggressive. I say that one quite a lot. And that's really relevant around jealousy as well. I think we have to talk about pre-morteming, preempting certain issues that can happen. Bingo, for anyone who knows me and follows me. It's a word that I use a lot. However, you have to look to yourself first. Jealousy is a message for you, not for your partner. You need to talk to your partner about it or partners about it and have a conversation, but you need a bigger conversation with yourself. What am I saying here? What does this mean for me? How do I feel about this? And bear in mind all those drugs and everything else as well that come in our bodies. Yep, that makes a difference too, but what does that mean? Does it matter? I think it's something we have to be really aware of. Anyone got any questions about jealousy or anything they want to say or share or ask? What are your thoughts on it? Anyone agree that it's a fear of loss? What do you think? Do you think that it's something that we can control? Is it a feeling we have to go through? As I say, some people don't feel it really, but you could argue that maybe people who don't feel intense emotions aren't frightened of loss, so they're not going to feel or experience it in the same way. Anyone got any questions before we go on to childhood fantasies? Yes, fear of loss seems like a good description, explanation. Controlling it might be difficult. And I think an LMB says fear of loss makes sense. I think the point is we don't have to control it. We have to work with it and work through it. What might I lose here? This person. This person is telling me I'm not going to lose them. You choose to believe or you choose not to believe. somebody can be having an affair behind your back. Somebody, the longest affair I've heard of, like in my client base, was 23 years. 23 years of an affair where he bought a boat with somebody. She ended up the mistress, quite an old-fashioned relationship. The mistress, that's what she called herself. She came into the house at one stage of the husband and wife and said, he's mine. I mean, fucking hell, where is his responsibility in this? And the wife said, I've known about you for years. He clearly isn't, because he hasn't left me. And she was really devastated. It was interesting because she said, you're coming with me. We're going to go off on our boat together, which they bought together and everything. And he said, no, I really like the situation the way it is. I'm happy to have both of you. But if you make me choose, I'm with my wife. 23 years. And she knew, whereas you meet other people, like, for example, I worked with somebody whose partner had been having an affair for 11 years and they had absolutely no idea. None at all. So actually talking is really important. So people are saying if fear of loss is relevant, it's good to recognize it. It's okay to feel it. For me, it's fear of loss and abandonment and need not being met. Absolutely, Grace. Tempe says uncontrollable fear of loss that we need to understand and deal with. Look, nothing is uncontrollable. And it's only worse when you try and control it. It becomes this much bigger thing. It's like trying to trap, I don't know, one of the most dangerous beasts from a J.K. Rowling book. And I'm sorry for any, I get she's a TERF, but when he keeps all those animals and beasts in this, there's these silver ones that live in this pot, but they grow to any size that they're in. That's why he keeps them in a teapot. I can't remember what they are. It's one of those Harry Potter type animals. But they grow to the size. If you try and keep something really small all the time, it's a question of, for me, it goes back to that kids book of you can't go over it, you can't go under it. Oh no, you've got to go through it. Swishy, swashy, swishy, swashy. The whole we're going on a bear hunt. It's really important to go through these things and accept them. Naomi says, insecurity or aversion. I'd like to hear more about aversion. I have in the past disliked a metamour enough that I didn't like feeling energy rubbing off on him, but I could feel it. The problem is, so like aversion is very different to jealousy and insecurity. If you develop a real dislike for somebody's metamour, it is definitely going to impact your relationship with them. The question then becomes, can I stay in this relationship or can't I? Because they're the two choices. And I think what's really discombobulating and disconcerting for somebody is, oh, you're really lovely. Why the fuck did you pick them? And then that's really, it's a huge impact, isn't it? Especially around jealousy. It's really confusing. That's not an okay person. Or they could be a TERF, for example. They could be racist. They could be all sorts of things. You're like, why do you put up with that? Or you watch them treated really badly. We've had this conversation before with somebody here. You watch your metamour treat your partner like a piece of shit. And you're absolutely shocked that they allow that to happen. And what it does is it disintegrates who that partner is for you in your eyes. And then you really have to think about, can I live with this or can't I? Makes a difference. Nikki, I accept these days that I can get jealous. I just now try and work through this and find why I'm feeling it. Sometimes I can't keep my mouth shut as I process it. I think you need an agreement with a partner on how to talk about these things, when to talk about these things, and the propriety of when. When a partner goes out with somebody and it's what you've agreed and everything's fine and there isn't an emergency, and you decide at 8 o'clock that they should come home, you don't have a right to phone and say you need to come home now. That's not fair. That's really, it's just not okay. It's controlling somebody else's relationship. So I think it's the timing of it. Of could you phone me when you go home, or could you phone me in the morning? When can we talk? And it needs to be agreed, looked at, and worked through. That doesn't impose on the other person. Unc, your description of the jealousy mechanism is one of the best that you've seen. Thank you very much. It's always more complex in the real world than in the model. Of course it is. It's fucking awful. It's an overwhelming feeling of not okayness. However, the more you understand what's going on underneath and the more you understand why it's there, the more power you have around it. And you need to work it through and have conversations. I'm Australian. Dangerous beasts are every day for me. So simple as, yeah, spiders and snakes, eh? Naomi, there was actually a good reason why they picked them, something worthy of paying attention. Yes, it is. It really is, Naomi. It's like, what's that about? Alchemy, they grow to the size of whatever. Yes, thank you very much, Dory. Annie CC, like, you know more than I do. They do, to the size of a house, didn't they? I think she's talking about my ex. JK Rowling, turf, trans exclusionary, reactionary feminist, I think. Did someone ask about that? Did I miss that? Sorry if they did. Jacob, I'm Australian too. Thanks, Jerry. I hadn't heard that term before. Had you not, Roy? Interesting. It's a big deal. So it's for anybody who says that a feminist excludes women who have transitioned to be women, that they don't count as women. I'm not going to go into that here and now. That's a very different subject. Okay, so anyone got any more questions they want to ask, or should we go on to childhood fantasies, different things? Who here is kinky, let's say, in any way, shape, or form? Most of you kinky in any way, shape, or form, or something along those lines?
Not me. How dare you, woman?
I know. Me, I'm a bit kinky. Yep. Okay. Who here, Krishna says yes, who here had fantasies as a child? Lots of people are saying yes. I know my audience. So who here had fantasies as a child growing up? And what sort of fantasies did you have? Now, for example, I know Jerry very well. I know some of Jerry's, like tying up Indians, wasn't it? Used to play cowboys and Indians, but used to tie people up.
It was cowboys and Indians, but in my day, it was also spies. It was Man from Uncle and James Bond, and the good guys were always men, and the bad guys were always women, and yeah.
So, yeah, lots and lots of fantasies. Spray that again, Deb. As children, children have fantasies. Children, when they're born, are born with sexual hormones in them. When you have a little boy baby who has a penis, he can get an erection. I mean, ask any mum who's had a little boy when they piss everywhere and everything as well. And little girls are born with sexual hormones, but those sexual hormones leave them and they reduce, and then as they go away, then their sexual hormones start to increase naturally in their own bodies the older they get. Zoe, so yeah, kinky fantasies, just a little bit kinky. Likewise, Zoe, I kidnap fantasies and being tied up. Kara says likewise. Andy says yes, fantasies when you would watch The Saint with women tied up and cleave gagged. Mark also held the record for the blindfolded knot tying the Cub Scouts at age 9. Chloe says, I really like that. I thought Jabba the Hutt must have really loved Princess Leia to make her look so pretty and chain her to him. It's interesting, isn't it? Now, I'm going to say something shocking. I didn't have any childhood fantasies whatsoever around kink. Zero, none whatsoever. It was triggered in me when I was 17 for the first time, and I had a kinky situation. So not everybody who's kinky fantasized about it as a child. They don't. Some people do. Some people come into kink years and years later. Some people really think about this all the time. And puberty is a really disconcerting time for a young person. Puberty can start happening for some people as young as 7 or 8. Some people are really into that pubescent phase at a very, very young age. Lance says, hypnosis, mind control, and bondage were fetishes of mine before I even knew what a fetish was. Yeah. And they can, or spanking, or a red bottom, or something. I knew what I liked, but wouldn't have identified them as kinky or fantasies until several years later. I think one of the most important messages we can give to anybody, and it's really important, is if you have a child who shares the fantasy or talks about it, don't necessarily sexualize it for them. Please be age appropriate. Don't necessarily go in and go, oh my God, you're kinky. I think we have to be really careful about how we can really turn a childhood's basic sexual interest into a fucking trauma. I think we can really cause some issues for children. We go way too far. You don't need to say, like, if your child's dressed in a onesie, you don't go, oh my God, baby, you're a furry. Fucking just don't do it. No, it's just unnecessary, but you'd be surprised. A lot of people do. Oh, I know what you are. I know all about this. So let me tell you, because this is what I wished I heard when I was 8. No, you fucking didn't. No one wished to hear this when they were 8. It is inappropriate. Grace, me either. First one I remember was late teen, seeing Grace Jones fight up Roger Moore and James Bond. LMB. I had no kinky fantasies, nor can remember sexual fantasies. I was not really interested in boy girlfriends. I was more interested in my hobbies, not until 17. Yes, and that's my point, you see. And actually, Angel then said, I never had any kinky fantasies, but since I can remember, I've always been very submissive. Now, you can argue that trauma can create some of these things. You can argue that experience do some of these things. Like it really varies. And I think we've got to be very, very careful. Lance, that's the problem I have with the current education system. Yes, our children know too much. I have a tiger onesie, some all sort of fluffy, but I'm not a furry. My fantasies were sexy, but not sexual. So I think we've got to be really careful not to take a childhood sexual curiosity and take it too far and give explanations to people. It's really important that we let children come into their own around these things and they find their own way. I didn't know, says Roy, why I enjoyed it, but there used to be lots of women tied up and rescued in TV programs when I was growing up. And that actually isn't portrayed as much anymore. It's, you know, those sort of films and series now come with trigger warnings about impropriety and how they are. So a lot of children who are growing up with these fantasies won't quite know where to go or what to do. So they'll start looking. And of course, when we start searching on the internet, we find some pretty horrific things. And that's not necessarily good for our children. So I remember once my youngest was in the garden with her dad, and she came back and she told me about it. And she was really upset. She used the word vagina because that's what I taught her. Still one of the best things to do, teach your children the right names for the right parts of their bodies. And she'd said to her dad, spray my vagina because it feels nice. And he gave her a whack on the back of the legs because he thought she was inappropriate. I think she was utterly appropriate. It felt nice. She asked for something. You can tell her and say, Erin, maybe don't ask for that in the garden. Like, you might be able to say that. Or maybe we don't say that sort of thing here, but actually in your bedroom or anywhere else you can. Like, there are ways of handling that are way better than a smack around the back of the fucking legs. So it's really important because children grow up with these fantasies. You did. Who felt that their fantasies were impactful to them negatively or positively, depending on how people handled them? Andy says, in the very early 80s, satin leggings on girls was fashionable. Also seeing pop stars in leather pants and makeup, like New Romantic, headbands and flicked back hair, really triggered something in me. To this day, music of that period has stayed with me. So when you're singing, oh, Vienna, you're like, you're there. That's it. That's you gone. I've always been very submissive, but was in my later teens before I found non-religious ways for that to be expressed. Yeah, religion plays a big part. Religion is very sacrificial. It has lots of regimes in it, you know, things that we do, mantras, self-flagellation. There's a lot of hurt in it and everything else as well. Zoe says, Scooby-Doo was clearly a poly group and Daphne loved being kidnapped. Maybe that's why I like redheads. Lance, let kids be kids. When it's time for them to start identifying and adulting, it's time, different ages for different kids, but let children be children. Yeah. Ayrshire Donna says, I blame my favourite Austrian Yorkshire aunt for my kink. We played tie-up games long before I knew of sex. How old was your aunt? We played tie-up games. Come the age of masturbation, bondage was in my thoughts. She was smashing. Okay. I hope the age difference, I hope she wasn't 20 and you were 8. I hope that, you know, there was I don't know, maybe I'm overreacting there. So I think sexual education is appropriate time, appropriate manner in some way, shape or form. And children need an outlet to be able to talk about these things, but they also need to explore and find out what these things mean. It can be really damaging to interfere in some way, shape or form. We can remember, I know that my eldest broke into my cupboard, which is quite spectacular, really, because I'd really child-proofed it. But she broke into it when she was 13. And she found the story of O and she found some other bits and pieces. So she clearly started to then look into it. And she talks about how that was one of her triggers. But you can argue that actually that was an environmental trigger. But in some way, genetically, she might be much more prone to some form of kink or submission because I am. Scooby-Doo says, Lance, Daphne, nothing. Velma is so hot. Lady Lilith says, my brother's older than one of my aunts. Fair enough. Dawning says, yes, I used to love tying up my next door neighbour's female pal when we were 6 or 7. I thought I'd invented the hog tie. Yeah, we do, don't we? But also we played doctors and nurses. We played mummies and daddies. We played all of those games when we're supposed to be finding out. But we tell children not to do that. It's really bad. Zoe says, Velma is hot too, but a redhead tied up and kidnapped. Yes, I'm feeling a bit worried about all the redheaded people in this room right now. This can be arranged. Okay, let's be nice now. But so children have sexual curiosity. It's quite a normal thing for them to go through. If they show a proclivity or something towards kink or anything else as well, I think what we've got to teach our children is consent and safety. Not too much, but consent and safety can be really important as well. And you might really disagree with me. So the amount of children who don't know these things, who don't know that they have the right to say no. I deal with so many people with sexual traumas. Even a person at the moment is going to a wedding and now needs to tell her friend that she doesn't want to go to that wedding because of somebody else that was there. And they are very private and will never give out their name or anything. You know, what a horrific thing to have to look back and remember that this somehow wasn't okay, that there was coercion involved. We need to teach children safety, propriety, and their capacity to say no, that they have a right to say no. Now, again, that can also go too far. I have another client whose daughter says, well, you can't, I'm not having a vaccination. You can't make me. It's my body. I don't consent to it. She's 8. Is she too young? Like, at what point do we say what's right or wrong around these things when it's about health? We need to teach them to say yes too. I agree, which is also the point I'm saying. When is it okay? We can go too far with consent, definitely, and say it's the be all and end all, and it isn't. But we have to really teach children. We have to have conversations. We have to not shame children around their sexual experiences as well. If we just tell them that sex is dirty and horrible and wrong. I had a client who was stroking himself because he thought it felt really nice. He was behind the sofa. I think it was a Christmas or something. And he was about 4 or 5. He liked it. His dad picked him up. I've told this story before. Picked him up, put him in the middle of the room and said, you don't fucking do that in front of the whole family. That is such a shame-inducing situation that it impacted his capacity to orgasm, to feel okay, and all of his sexual interests later. So it's really important that we need to share, that we need to show certain things, but please don't go too far. And please don't, especially if you're a kinky person, don't assume that just because your child loves being tied up, that means they are definitely kinky. It can mean many things. So like being tied up can also feel really nice for people who want to feel safe. Louise, so it's Angel, sorry. Teaching the right names, being allowed to say no, it's their body, they're allowed to touch themselves, but in a private environment like in their room. Exactly. Teaching the right names is really important. There's a lot of correlation between children who aren't taught the right names and pedophiles and different people, anyone who targets a child, because when a child doesn't have the right name, they're told a fantasy around something, rather than that is a vagina, that is a vulva, that is a penis, rather than that's your dangly thing or that's your mini. And lots of people have these, that's your front bottom. I mean, is it? Is it a front bottom? You probably heard the most bizarre words when you were growing up. That's your lady garden. My ex-husband has a daughter with his wife, and she was taught that her vulva was called Minnie. That child was seriously traumatized when she went to Disney World for the first time and met Minnie Mouse, believe me. It's just, let me think about it. It makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? So much is not taught in schools, which would be essential in everyday life. As adults, I really agree, from psychology to getting a mortgage, from how to run a bank account, from how to run a budget. I really agree with you. I can relate to sex being dirty, sinful in religion and culture. Yet it's such a damaging thing to do to a child, to say, you only do this, this is what you've got to do. And that's where we're preaching things like monogamy, which can be great for some. But it's all about finding out who you are and what it means within some constructs and boundaries that keep somebody safe. Children need rules, children need consequences, children need boundaries, but they also need love and freedom and creativity and expression. It's getting that balance right between all of those things, which is really difficult, because most families feel like, oh God, what do I say? When do I say that that's right? How do I explain this sexually? What do I do? And the fantasies that we have are interesting. Oh dear, Minnie Mouse, I'm dying. I know, it was really when the girls came back and told me, she was so distressed. I'm not surprised. Lance says that entire timeline of cartoons were not really for kids. Bugs Bunny started cross-dressing in the 50s. In the 60s and 70s, Underdog with a magic pet pill in his ring, Popeye taking spinach through his pipe, Scooby and Shaggy in the back of that hippie van, always having the munchies. Our childhood entertainment geared us towards sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And yes, and some cartoons have also got very violent, very aggressive, and very much. And actually, a lot of our stuff nowadays is also going incredibly. It's juxtapositioning. We've got extremes of no, it's got to be very violent, and no, it's got to be very tame and dressed for people. So it's a real mix. That story about Minnie and Minnie Mouse, can't make this shit up. Well, you could, but I mean, it really did happen. So Andy says, I was about 14 when I finally learned that tying up and being tied was known as bondage. But the difference that children have now is the access to the internet. You are 3 words, 3 clicks away, 1, 2, 3, from bestiality if you do not have safety on your internet as a child. 3, that's not a lot of clicks for a child or anyone else to make. Jerry says, it's very hard to find originally uncensored Tom and Jerry's cartoons these days. I love them. Yes, and because they're really inappropriate, aren't they, nowadays, for a lot of reasons. So he says, that's not okay. It's not, is it? But that's how long it takes. 3 clicks if you put in the right sort of thing to find out. So we need to protect our children from a lot of these things. And even just porn, actually, the way porn is so easy to get, it ain't a good example of what good sex looks like, of what normal bodies look like. You know, it really isn't. Lance says, Barney, I love you, you love me. I teach children codependency. Give me Yakko, Wacko and Dot singing the Anvil song. But maybe there's a balance between both of them, you know, and parents and children do love each other. So he says, I hated Barney. Right, anyone got anything else to say about childhood fantasies in any way, shape or form? How are we doing around that? Does anybody want to know anything else? And then what I can tell you is, just before we finish, is what we're doing next week and the week after, if you're interested. So next week, what I've got going on, if you fancy coming along, is I'm going to be talking about a whole workshop about some of the history of BDSM, some of the responsibilities of a top and a bottom, both sides of the slash, training, what that looks like. We talk about protocols, we talk about mantras, going to be talking about collars, going to be talking about the evolution and the positions that people take, and maybe some of the words. And a lot of it will be a Q&A. What warning signs? What are you talking about there, Lance? What do you mean by warning signs? Sorry, I might have missed that. So that's what we're going to be talking. Are you getting Cosmic to talk about the law and BDSM? No, I will talk a little bit about the law, a little bit. Warning me, because I hate Barney. Sorry, with you. So we'll be talking about history, BDSM. We can talk a little bit about the law, what laws impact us, why. However, that also varies. If you're in America, it varies state to state. It's quite generic in the UK. And we're just going to be talking about BDSM in general. And then the week after that, we're going to be talking about arse play, kind of like a 101. We're going to be talking about fisting, vaginal and anal, and we're going to be talking about sounding, everything about those things. And then the week after, we're talking about all things orgasm, all over the body, and squirting as well. But next week is about history of BDSM, training in BDSM, responsibilities, mantras, protocol, collars, or anything else you want to ask about any of those things. Luke says, I remember as a child Googling Disney images and I couldn't find the picture I wanted, carried up later pages and then came up with Disney porn. Oh no, that is shocking, isn't it? That's just not what you want to see. Okay, sounding again, red. I know, but we have got fisting before it, and we've got arse play as well. You might like those things. You can always leave at the sounding bit. I know a lot of people, we are talking about male and female sounding. We're talking about every urethra on the planet, not just a penis. So I hope everybody's got something out of today, learned something, found something different, you know, whatever. So thank you all very much for coming. Hope to see you next week. Hope you enjoyed it or got something. And as I say, we'll talk about everything as well around generalized BDSM. So please bring any questions you want as well, because I may or may not know the answer. It's quite exciting if I don't. All right. I will see you all next week. Thank you very much. Wank away. Nice to see you all, and see you later. Don't do anything I wouldn't do. Thanks.